With the latest PTR update, Blizzard has revealed a ton of new trinkets and items coming in 10.1. Today, we're going to go over them. Before we get to that though, a lot of my viewers aren't subscribed, so if you're watching this video and you enjoy it, consider hitting the subscribe button. Also, drop a like and leave a comment. It helps to spread the video and grow the channel. With that, enjoy the video. So first, let's go over the new trinkets from the upcoming raid. Now the raid, Aberrus the Shadow Crucible, is here before you. I kind of wanted to just open with this shot of the raid. I think it's a pretty sick looking raid. I actually have a video going over all the bosses and stuff. If you want to check that out, it's on my channel. But with that, let's check out the new trinkets coming in the raid. So we'll open up our dungeon journal. And there are a few interesting trinkets for sure coming from this new raid. We go loot, we go trinket, we'll just work our way down. So we'll start with DPS trinkets, and then we'll go to kind of range and stuff like that. The first three I want to talk about are the Idols of the Idols of Arrogance. Now these drop from the second last boss of the raid. Not going to spoil who that is, but these are class trinkets. So there are 3 trinkets, each of them dropping for a different class. So we have Idol of Chaotic Arrogance, which is a crit effect. Your area of effect spells and abilities have a chance to grant you 3,500 primary for 12 seconds, and during that time you take 5% more damage. The Idol of Debilitating Arrogance, your harmful debuffs, periodic spells, and abilities have a chance to grant you 3,500 primary. During this time you bleed for 62,000 nature damage. This gives you verse. And then the Idol of Domineering Arrogance. Your summons attacks have a chance to grant you 5,000 primary for 12 seconds. During this time, you are slowed by 10%. And this has changed a little bit for Shaman and Monk, where it's whenever you summon your main cooldown, it gives you primary on top of it. So we see here, the first one is Warrior, Paladin, Mage, Demon Hunter, and Evoker. The second one is Rogue, Priest, Death Knight, and Druid. And the third one is Hunter, Shaman, Warlock, and Monk. Now, personally, I'm not sure these trinkets will end up being that good. However, they're all fairly interesting, giving you this big primary stat proc on top of a slight downside. Now, these are trinkets that we'll have to kind of see what the final proc chance will be. But these trinkets will be 450 eye level. They drop from the second last boss of the raid. They drop at an increased eye level because they're very rare. Which, by the way, very rare items are back, unfortunately. And we'll have to see how these turn out. Now, I could see these being really good or really bad, really just depending on that proc and how big of a downside each of them are. I think personally, 5% increased damage is the biggest of the downsides. 62,000 nature damage isn't that big of a deal. And being slowed by 10% is also not that big of a deal, but taking 5% more damage can actually matter. Another very rare trinket is the Seething Black Dragon Scale. This drops from the very first boss of the raid, so it shouldn't be too bad to get, and this trinket looks really, really good. So this is basically the trinket from Rathian back in Nyalotha, where your abilities have a chance to give you dragon rings that give you a ton of crit for 15 seconds, as well as some leak. Now this one also allows you, has an on use, which while you're in the air kind of crashes you to the ground and deals damage to you, not to you, to enemies if you travel for 15 yards, which isn't that useful, but you know, situationally could come up. You can never really count on this to do anything, but if it does do something, that's pretty cool. This trinket will be powerful if you like crit, otherwise it won't be that good. But Black Scale from Rathian was insanely powerful. I don't think this one will be any worse. I think this one could honestly be a little bit better because of the leech. We'll see what the proc chance is, but this one looks really, really good. So with the very rare trinkets out of the way, I think now it's time to look through the rest of the trinkets that drop from the raid. So Elementium Pocket Anvil drops from the second boss of the raid, and it's a bit of an interesting trinket. So this trinket ends up making it so that your filler has a chance to basically deal damage to the target. It has an on use as well, which increases the chance for you to do this, as well as giving you increased chance for 10 seconds after each use. And this effect stacks up to 5 times. This trinket looks really interesting for any class where you end up doing a lot of your filler, where you end up spamming your filler pretty often. Even then, though, I'm not sure how it will stack up against other options. We'll have to wait and see. But as a trinket for those who spam their filler like rogues, probably not have it because there are other better options. But it could be interesting depending on the spec filler chosen and how often you end up pushing it. Next up is Envoy to the Empty, a mastery trinket which drops from the last boss. You open up a pair of gates to the void to redirect the orbit of Anshul, the cosmic wanderer, through your target, dealing 465,000 cosmic damage split between all nearby enemies. Damage is increased by up to 5 based on how many enemies you strike. So sorry, it's increased based on in each enemy struck up to 5. This seems really powerful. It's a lot of it's also a 450 trinket, which does matter, and that is a large hit. Dealing that much damage at once is really, really powerful, honestly. So it'll be interesting to see how much this will actually do on 450. This definitely seems powerful. It does come from the last boss, which does make it a bit harder to do, but we'll have to see at the end. But this trinket looks pretty promising. Next up is the Fortified Dread Slab. This is a tank trinket. It's an on-use to gain 5 stacks of Fortified Dread Slab plating, which reduces damage you take by a flat amount, and as well as your movement speed and dodge chance. And whenever you take 59,000 damage, you consume a stack and basically deal a little beam in front of you that deals damage to it. It's a 2-minute trinket. I don't think this will be that good. Reducing 7,000 damage you take, I guess could be fine in like an M+, where a lot of damage taken is just like melees and autos and stuff. But honestly, 59,000 damage isn't that much either. 20,000 damage, Shadow Flame damage isn't a lot. So I just think this trinket is currently tuned too low to get any good effect. Next we have Igneous Flowstone. This is from the third last boss. This is an Agi Intellect trinket. So you steadily gain or lose title level attunement. You go up to 45 and then go back down to 0. At 45 stacks, your next harmful spell or ranged ability grants you basically 4,000 critical strike. At 0 stacks, your next harmful spell or ranged ability launches a lava wave that grows in size, dealing 138,000 volcanic damage to your target, split between all nearby enemies. This could be pretty interesting. It depends how fast the stacks gain, but you get a lot of crit at 45, and you can do a pretty decent amount of damage at 0. So if the stacks gain reasonably fast, then this could actually end up being pretty strong. This drops from the third last boss as well, which could be max eye level. We'll have to end up seeing. We don't know the breakdown yet, but this definitely looks interesting. Next, we have a trinket. We don't know what it does. It gives you crit, has some kind of equip. We don't know yet. Pop-up. We have this trinket. It has no name yet, but it's basically elegy. So you resonate with the power of the chosen Dragonflight, granting 590 secondary stat depending on the Dragonflight you choose. Allies with a different resonance gain 65 secondary stat, and this effect does not stack. So you can gain, I imagine how this reads is that you can gain 1 effect per resonance, so up to 4. So you have yourself and 3 others. Or 4 others. I guess there are 5 Oath Stones, so we'll have to see if there are 5 buffs or if there are 4 buffs. But I do think this could be pretty powerful. I think the stats are pretty low, unfortunately. But we'll have to end up seeing 590 secondary stat is more than a 421 incarnate icon, but not by a lot. But then you also give out 65 secondary stat at all times, and you would get back 190 some if you have 3 others with this. So this could be pretty interesting. Incarnate's powerful, but it's a little bit different than that. LG was pretty strong as well, so we'll have to see on this one. But it looks strong off the start. We have 4 more trinkets here from the raid. Next up is Rashok's Molten Heart. So it's an intellect trinket. Equip your healing spells and abilities have a chance to draw additional power from the core, restoring 43 mana and invigorating your target, healing them for 6,000 per second for 10 seconds. So 60,000. Any overhealing from this effect is unleashed upon expiration, granting your ally up to 1,500 verse for 12 seconds. I think this trinket actually looks really powerful. Again, if the proc chance is super low, it won't be that strong. But being able to both heal a ton and also give your target a verse buff and also get mana back. Seems very powerful for a lot of more mana intensive healers. Or, really this just seems like a powerful trinket if the proc chance is decent enough. 60,000 healing, mana, and a verse shield, and a verse buff. Seems like a really, really strong effect for a healing trinket. Next, we have Vessel of Searing Shadow. This is an intellect trinket. Your harmful spells have a high chance to draw unstable flames to you from the vessel, increasing your haste by 101 and dealing 800 fire damage over 15 seconds, stacking up to 5 times, so that's 505 haste. Upon reaching 5 stacks, you launch a shadow spike at your target and consume the flames, dealing 33,000 shadow damage immediately, and an additional 50,000 damage over 12 seconds. This seems good, but it seems undertuned. The haste could be interesting. It would be a lot of haste, but you don't end up getting that much damage from the secondary proc, and then you lose all the haste. So this one seems kind of mid. We'll have to see how it ends up, but I'm not too impressed by it. We have Ward of the Faceless Ire. This is usable by everything, so probably tanks and healers. It's an on-use with a 3-minute cooldown. Grant an ally Writhing Ward for 10 seconds, absorbing up to 344,000 damage. If broken, the ward coalesces into Writhing Ire, dealing 44,000 Shadow Flame damage over 6 seconds to the last enemy to strike it. This seems like a powerful external trinket for a healer, or maybe for an off-tank to use on the other tank, but this does seem really good for healing and for living big hits. It has a survival portion, which is a pretty large shield, although the cooldown is long, but it also deals damage, and whenever you have both damage and survivability in one trinket, it's normally pretty decent. Finally, from the raid, we have Zakali Chaos Grapnel. Now this is a strength trinket. You hurl the grapnel to impale your target, dealing 81,000 physical damage and heaving you towards them with tremendous force. On impact, you deal 111,000 volcanic damage, split between all nearby enemies. Impact damage is increased per enemy struck, up to 5 enemies. So this is actually really interesting because it gives Death Knights a forced mobility option where they can instantly kind of grapple to your target on a 1.5-minute cooldown, and the damage it deals also doesn't seem that bad. It'll be interesting to see what other trinkets they get. I don't really play Death Knight, but if they absolutely need that forced displacement or that movement, this will be very powerful and very interesting for them. Paladins as well, potentially, but their movement is getting better with the class reworks in 10.0.7. So on top of the trinkets from the raid, there are going to be some other things. There's a few other rare items from the raid I didn't mention. There's a cloak from the last boss. There's also a staff somewhere that's only usable by a few classes, but those things don't have any effects yet, so I didn't really feel like covering them. Now we're actually going to go into the crafted items. There's a few new ones there. A lot of them aren't on the 10.1 PTR yet, so we're just going to go over the 4 that are on the PTR, and then there's one more thing I want to talk about at the end. So first are going to be 2 new blacksmithing items under the Hell Steel thing. There's the Hell Steel Bunker Buster, which honestly probably going to get the name changed, but we'll see. And right now, these don't have embellishments on the tooltip, but I do expect that to change. Anyways, this is a 2-handed mace where you can pick the stats again. It has an on-use effect where you strike your target with an erupting slam, dealing some amount of Shadow Flame damage. After a short delay, residual Shadow Flame rains on a random location within 15 yards, dealing some amount of Shadow Flame damage to all enemies in an 8-yard radius. This effect can also damage the caster. So I'm not sure how good this will end up being. It's kind of like the Homeland Raid Horn from the dwarf boss in Ultima and Dungeon, where you use it and fire raidens down, dealing damage to basically everything in the swirly, yourself and enemies. If the damage is strong and if the 8-yard radius, the 15 yards isn't that spread out, if you can kind of center it around yourself, and this could be pretty good, especially with the nerf to Lariat that I'll get to at the end of this section. But the random damage and the fact it can hurt yourself seems to make this kind of a higher risk, higher reward weapon. So we'll see if this ends up being used. It's definitely an interesting option. It's an interesting weapon. A weapon with an on use that can deal damage is kind of cool. We'll see if this ends up getting used, but the fact that Lariat is sort of getting nerfed makes this, have more chance for more people. Unfortunately, we still only have 2 embellished options. There's no way to get a third, so a lot of these might just not be used. We also have the Hellsteel Impact Buckler. This is a shield. This has stats, so it has Critical Strike and Mastery, and has the unique equipped embellished 2, unlike the other weapon, which is kind of weird. This has an equip. Taking damage has a chance to store stacks of Hellsteel Immolation. After receiving 5 stacks, your next ability will release the stored energy, dealing some amount of Shadow Flame damage to all enemies in a radius around you. This effect repeats for each stack of Hellsteel Immolation. So basically, whenever you get to 5 stacks, your next ability will release the damage around you 5 times, or more, I guess, if you don't use an ability after getting 5 stacks. This could be interesting. It depends what shield options there are in the raid. This is strictly a tank shield, so strictly for Prot, Paladin, and Warrior. But the way it deals damage in an area around you seems pretty strong for Mythic Plus in particular, dealing some AoE damage and also having a pretty strong proc effect where, it happens pretty often because of how much auto attack damage instances you're taking. Definitely seems interesting. Pretty cool that it's out there. We'll see if this ends up replacing other embellishment options. Now we have a cloak as well. If I search up Spore, we should actually find the 2 items. So we have Undulating Spore Cloak. This is a tailoring recipe. It's a cloak. You can pick the stuff on it. When above 70% health, you gain some amount of leech and heal for some amount every 5 seconds. When below 30% health, the spores in your cloak expand and shield you for some amount of damage for 10 seconds, only every 2 minutes. This is a cloak where basically when you're above 70% health, you leech and heal to try and keep you above that health threshold. And when you're below 30% health, you get a shield to prevent you from dying. This seems really interesting in any form where you're taking a lot of damage or where you're doing some kind of progression content. I could definitely see this being used there, just as a way to stay alive, just as a way to stay more comfortable at those life totals. We'll see if this ends up being played by any specific class or any significant, thing. Again, we'll see if this replaces any of the other embellishments, because the ones we have right now are pretty strong. But the effect is certainly powerful for this. We'll see how much health you heal for, but even then, this is a good way of keeping yourself alive if you need it. The last item is Spore Keeper's Baton. So this is a wand for ranged characters. So when you equip it, your spells have a chance to activate the spores inside the baton, causing them to rush to your aid. If you're aiding an ally, so healing them, the spores will provide them with Verse, 782, for 12 seconds. And if you're attacking an enemy, they will instead deal 6,000 nature damage over 12 seconds while shielding you for 3,000 damage. Now, this is a 382 weapon, so this numbers will scale a lot. You can craft all the way up to 447 or 444, one of those two. So that's almost 100 eye levels above this. It's like 100, no, it's like 60 above this or something. That is a big eye level increase, so these numbers will be much higher. This is interesting. I know casters don't have as strong of options. They have like Amos of the Blue. So if Lariat actually ends up being pretty bad, then I could see this being pretty useful. I don't really play a clothy or a range character right now, so I don't know a lot of the options they have for weapons, but this definitely seems interesting as both a healing and a DPS side. Being able to give Verse to people is very strong. 782 Verse is, I think, roughly 5% off the top of my head. I could be wrong about that. And then doing that much damage is also decent. Again, this will scale off eye level, so it'll actually end up being much higher. But I think overall, this is pretty interesting and could be pretty strong. So those are the new items currently in the game. There are a few others that just haven't made it in yet, and whenever they do, I'll cover those as well. But there's one more thing I want to talk about, and that is about crafted gear. So we don't know if this is a bug or not, but right now, all crafted gear on the PTR has actually upgraded 3 item levels, or 2 item levels, I guess, in some cases. So any 415 piece is now 417, any 418 piece is now 421. We're not sure what's causing that. We're not sure if it's intended, but, just keep an eye out for that. But the big thing is that Lariat has actually changed. So it works the same as before. Your spells and abilities have a chance to empower one of your gems, granting 563 of their stat. But here's the change. It lasts 5 seconds, an additional 1 second per elemental gem. So on live right now, this proc lasts for 12 seconds. If you have full sockets, one socket, two, three, four, 5, 6, 7, 8, then you end up getting 5 plus 8 being 13. So you can actually have a longer buff than current. However, important to note that the only things that are elemental gems are the stat ones here. These primary stat gems are primalist gems and actually don't count for the duration. So if you're fully socketed, then elemental lariat is actually unnerfed. And it actually could be a little bit stronger if you wanted to drop your primary stat gem for 1 more second of the buff. I don't think that's worth it, but hey, if you really, really like secondaries, it could be. But as you lose sockets, this gets much worse, and then as you gain sockets again, it gets a lot better. So it's in this weird scenario where at the start of a tier, it's very strong because you have those sockets from last tier, and then as you gear in that new tier, you get more items from the new raid for Mythic Plus. It actually gets worse and worse because you lose it on sockets. And then towards the end of the tier, when you're fully geared and start grabbing sockets from your vault, it gets better and better again. So I'm glad they changed Lariat, otherwise it would just be Abyss for the entire expansion, no questions asked. Now it's going to be a little bit interesting where you actually want a neck in the middle that isn't Lariat, probably. It lasting for 5 seconds is a big nerf. I guess it could end up being like 8 or 7 with the 3 sockets on it. It's still going to be very, very powerful. You're not mad you made it, but it is worse than previous options. It is worse than it used to be and could end up being replaced in that middle of gearing. So those are all the new trinkets and raid items, as well as crafted items from the first PTR update for patch 10.1. There are also some dungeon items coming, as well as more stuff coming in future patches. And I'm going to do another video for those whenever they come out for the future stuff. And dungeon stuff, I'm kind of waiting to see tuning. We'll see what ends up changing and stuff like that. So expect that in another video in the future as well. But for that, that's today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. Drop a like, leave a comment which of these you're most excited to pick up. Maybe my analysis was off too. There's definitely some interesting things from the raid and from crafting. So I'm looking forward to getting my hands on these items and playing with them and trying them out. So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Drop a sub if you did. Consider becoming a channel member as well for cool perks and emotes and to support yours truly. And with that, I will see you guys next time. Peace. A big shout out to my YouTube channel members, Dimmy and Flapjack67. Your guys' support has really helped me make these videos as good as I can. If you're looking to support me and help me make more videos and better videos, then click the link in the description below to learn more about channel membership and get a ton of sweet perks while you help me make this channel as great as it can. Thank you.